everybody. Welcome to the Hallmarkies podcast. Today, I'm Rachel, and I'm very excited to bring to you our analysis of the recent Chronicle Mysteries series that has been on Hallmark Movies Mysteries. It's a new series with Allison Sweeney. We had announced that we were going to have Lori Stark be my guest for this, but she had some things come up. And so our very good friend Lisa is here to pinch hit for us, and she's amazing. Thank you so much, Lisa, for coming on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. Of course, I mean, I'm sorry that you missed out on Lori Stark because she's amazing, but I am glad to try and step into her shoes, which is going to be difficult. But here I am. Yeah. Hi, guys.
Yes. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And before we get on to talking about all of this nonsense, we do have some sad things to talk about, but I didn't want to go without sharing our condolences and the sad news of Luke Perry's passing today. It's being recorded on Monday, and we're just really sad.
Yeah, it's really hard to wrap my brain around, just because, you know, that was one of the first, you know, shows as a young person where I identified and thought, you know, like, these kids really get it, and it was my staple. And of course, like a million other teenage girls at the time, we all fell in love with Dylan from the moment we saw him. So, you know, and for me, it really stuck in when he was on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I was like, yes, we're going to get married. It's just a matter of when, not if. Obviously.
Yeah. So I wasn't allowed to watch the early days of Beverly Hills 90210. I'd started in 1990, and so I was only 9. I was too young. In fact, it was kind of a show that I would sort of sneak watch for a lot of years because my parents wouldn't allow it, and with my friends, and then because it, you know, was a long show, 10 years, and then once I was in high school, so those later years, and then in college, because I went to college in 98, and so once that all happened, so I felt more invested in those later years of the show than the early years.
Yeah, I fell off. Like, it was always, to me, geared towards like I felt like at the beginning it was one-off shows where you had, you know, a whole premise start to finish, and each show was on its own, and then eventually it turned into more of a soap opera where they carried storylines through. I mean, they carried storylines through, but not in the same way, and then it started changing to where it was like almost like a teenage soap opera, and that's kind of when I dropped off. I got older, and I was just like, okay, I'm over this, and I stopped watching. But yeah, it's really hard to wrap my brain around, because I mean, not that we were that close in age, but, you know, he's like my generation, and
I know. And, you know, everybody liked Dylan. You know, it was Dylan and Brandon. Oh my gosh.
Right.
It really is. And he was very young. It was very sad. And so, you know, he was in the Good Night for Justice movies here at Hallmark, which we did review the first one back in our Hallmark Movies Now episode. We reviewed one of those, and that was fun. And then we also reviewed, I think, Love in Paradise.
I like that
for one of us. Yeah, I really enjoyed that one as well. And he's definitely the standout of the movie for sure.
Right.
In that one, because it's pretty. He adds a lot of kind of fun to it. And he always plays sort of a cowboy kind of character on Hallmark, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And he did another movie called The Pledge, which I haven't seen.
I have not seen that one,
but way back in the day, and where he was also a cowboy. So but anyway, we just wanted to share that, and you know, definitely our thoughts and prayers go out to his family and friends. And
absolutely,
that's a definite loss. So there we go. Now let's talk about some silly mysteries.
Okay.
And if you guys want to share your thoughts about you know, Luke Perry then put in the comment section or on Twitter. We'd love to hear your memories and thoughts. So, all right. So the Chronicle Mysteries, everybody knows I am not a huge fan of the mysteries. I'm very picky when it comes to the mysteries. And I was pretty excited for this one though. I I worked really hard to get my interview with Allison Sweeney. It was very difficult.
Right.
And so just for that reason alone, I was kind of excited because I'd gotten pretty invested in the series because just trying to get this interview. And I must have emailed, I felt like 20 different people, talked to all these different, I finally was able to contact her. The Chronicle Mysteries had an Instagram account who I contacted, and then they referred me to another person who's like a producer who then I talked to, and then finally
Oh my goodness, yeah.
it was a lot of work, and I was so proud of it. And I felt like because this was her idea and because it was an original script, and she was so invested in podcasts and true crime podcasts, and also I said this is going to be really cool, this is going to be really different. And so I was actually, even though I'm normally that into these mystery shows, I was actually pretty excited for this one. And I walked away feeling pretty disappointed by pretty much all of them. It's not that they're awful. They're just very generic, and I was hoping that they would be special. And I think that all of the podcasting elements, which I thought could have made it special, were very poorly used.
Right. And I will say, in my general opinion of the three, I really had fun because I do enjoy the mysteries. I will say this first. I do enjoy the mysteries. Part of the reason why I love the mysteries is because I really like trying to figure it out before the end, and I like competing with my husband to see who can figure it out. And and I just there's a time when I just don't really want to go down the love avenue, the romance avenue, and even though there's always a tint, like a little hint of romance in these, like most of the time it's just focused on the mystery. And so I do enjoy that. So overall I had fun because I thought these were two out of the three had enough red herrings to keep me guessing. And overall I agree with you, the podcasting stuff, just because I'm a true crime podcast fanatic, I absolutely love them, that I was just a little put off just because I kept thinking, this is not how this works. This is not how they do true crime podcasts.
Like I kept feeling like, have any of these people ever listened to a podcast? But I know that they have.
Yes.
Because Allison is a big fan.
In real life, right? This is, she's likes it, right? And
so what, for people that don't know about these true crime podcasts, it's basically kind of similar to, say, like Dateline, kind of, but stretched over a season. So you learn little bits, but it's a scripted podcast.
Yeah, it's not live. It's not like you find stuff each week and then show it up. Like, because in a murder mystery or missing persons case or a cold case, even though it's kind of, not a live case, you still aren't guaranteed interesting information week by week.
Right.
You aren't guaranteed anything. And so these people put in months and months, sometimes a couple of years, researching and getting permissions and interviews and weaving it all together into a very compelling narrative that we can follow and be like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Next week? No,
and the biggest, most famous one is probably the show Serial,
right?
Which is done by Sarah Koenig and Julie Snyder. Sarah Koenig's the voice, and so what they've done 3 seasons, and the first season was all about the 1999 murder of a high school senior in Baltimore, and the possibility that the wrong person had been convicted.
Right.
And then the second season was all about Bo Bergdahl and
Right.
his desertion of his troop in Afghanistan. And then, so then there's a third season, which I have not listened to on the third season, but it's a whole package. They literally script it out. They write it out, and you get clues, and they're trying to kind of walk you through the process, so as an investigation. But I understand that would make this kind of show difficult,
Mm-hmm.
because it's all, you'd have to kind of you kind of have to have maybe her podcasting as a narrator,
Yeah.
and be like, and then they went to blah 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 blah, and then show the investigation. I think you'd have to do it that way,
Right.
so you could have that kind of scripted. But what I would have done, and it would be a slight variation on how it really happens, I would have done it as more sort of an investigative piece of investigative journalism. And you're right, like it wouldn't work, because you it could be really boring. Like you could
Yeah.
figure it out on the first day. But the it would have, I think, been fun to me if they had like leads coming in from her listeners, and she talks to the leads, she goes and looks into them, she has interviews maybe with people involved on the podcast, something like that. I mean, that wouldn't have been exactly what they do on a show like Serial, but it would have been, it would have felt, it would have been better, I think.
Yeah.
That's how I would have probably gone. And the way that the thing they chose is, she's just a reporter. Like, she's not a podcaster.
Right.
She's not. I mean, they show her so minimally doing podcasts, especially in the second one. I couldn't even believe it. And they she's not, she's just a reporter. She actually is the editor for the paper, and the paper is sponsoring her podcast. And so it was just really disappointing in
Yeah.
that
I mean,
level.
so for me, I understand, like, whenever I come into any sort of movie, it doesn't matter what it is, I always have to have a little bit of suspension of, belief, just
Sure.
because things have to fall in just the exact way for these things to happen. And I know it's even more so when you come on Hallmark, because they want to craft on the Hallmark Channel side a happy ever after. And so you have to kind of put aside a lot of, normal everyday things and get into this world. And on the mystery side, of course, the same thing. I mean, these things are always very neatly solved. And so I always have to get into that mind frame. So I gave them a lot of leeway, but in the end, I just kept, it was almost like, it was very distracting, just because I
Yeah.
thought, this isn't how it works. And I know that they have to do things for dramatic purposes. And so it wouldn't be any fun just to watch her sitting in a room and do a bunch of research. But honestly, and this is where I fail a lot of times, I try not to watch a lot of previews of the mysteries, because
Yeah.
I don't want any insight ahead of time. I like to try and be like fresh and non-spoilery. So I didn't realize it was 3 separate movies. I honestly thought it was going to be a
That
3-part
would have been
series
smart.
of this woman
Yeah.
who was Lisa Drupt, who was missing, and that it was going to be a 3-part series of her
Mm.
podcast into how she went missing and whether. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so when halfway through the first movie, I was like, well, they're going to solve this. This is what has happened. And then I realized, oh, it's 3 separate movies. So
Like, there is no distinguishable difference between Taylor Cole's character in Ruby Herring, as she's like basically an investigative reporter, and Alex's character in this series.
okay. Well, I will say this. Her recorder, I looked it up because it was really cool. That little recorder that she took around with her.
Uh-huh.
I looked it up and I was like, okay, this is really cool. I have zero need for it, but I did look it up on Amazon because I
Uh-huh.
thought that's a cool thing and I really want to carry that around with me in the event I ever need to have a on the spot interview. So I did pick up that little nugget from these movies.
I
Yeah.
have never seen that recorder before. How
Oh,
much?
I paused it.
Do you remember how much it costs?
It was like $200 and I paused it and
Okay.
I wrote down the name and then I went to Amazon and looked it up because yeah, I'm a giant nerd. I paused it so I could figure it out. Because I thought, okay, is this one of those things that they made for the movie, like in Home Alone 2, when he has that little voice recorder and then they
Right.
realized that kids would love it, so they actually produced it and you could buy it, which I
Yeah.
never got one, even though I was desperate for one. Thanks, mom and dad. But I was like, is this a real thing or is this something that they made up for that? Because that would be cool too. But I look at, no, it's a real thing, and you can buy all kinds of stuff for it. And yeah, I was like around I think it was like 218 or something. And did I put it in my wish list? Yes, I did. Do I need
Right.
it? Absolutely not.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that is supposed to just get better sound or something like that when she's
I think it was like, yeah, it had like 4 channel where you could, the two mics went 2 different ways, so you could pick up both, and that way, instead of um and you could hook it up, like there was I watched a whole video on it. You could hook it up, and yeah, it was just,
Oh,
I
there
was
you
way
go.
too invested into the microphone. Anyways, okay, I'm sorry.
But really, I mean, really, because Ruby Herring is a reporter. I mean, she's like a
Yes.
consumer reporter at the beginning, but she
Right.
basically is an investigative reporter by the end. There's no difference
Right.
between Ruby Herring and Alex. They're both just reporters.
Yeah.
And so the thing that was frustrating to me is that it's not like it was really that bad. It was just super generic.
Yeah.
All the stories, her character was super generic. Everything was just very generic, and that can be fun. I'm not saying it couldn't be fun, but it had the chance, I think, to be something really cool
Mm-hmm.
and better than the average Hallmark mystery. And I don't know, I'd be surprised if anybody is putting this as better than the typical Hallmark mystery. I haven't talked to anybody who would say this is better than Mystery 101, for example. And I certainly don't think this is as good as a garage sale mystery. That's for sure.
Mm.
And so I don't know. I just I kind of wonder sometimes if Hallmark knows what a podcast is. Various things. Um,
Right.
but yeah, they just did a really bad job of and they just gave it no time. Like I said, especially the second one. I mean, the idea that she is able to you'd get the idea that you just kind of sat down in a basement somewhere and we're like, hey, I'm gonna report a true crime podcast now. And it's a little more complicated than that.
Yeah.
Like I know just from doing the silly Hallmark podcast that it takes a lot of preparation and work to I mean to edit, to get it ready, to
Yeah.
have all my notes, all that stuff. And I mean, I really kind of wondered, like, what is the purpose of Alex's podcast? Because it doesn't seem to help her to figure out the cases ever.
Mhm.
And so what's she trying to accomplish? Is she just doing it for fun?
Right.
She,
Right.
she she's never gotten a single clue. And so it just basically becomes a slightly used narration tool,
Yeah. I
which
mean,
is a bummer.
yeah.
Yeah,
No,
I'm too hard on it.
I mean, overall, I honestly, I like the darker, grittier ones. I think because Hallmark Channel is so light in their
Uh-huh.
romances, and they're very sweet and they're very easygoing, and sometimes I want that extra edge. And so these I thought were a little darker. They were a lot, even the overall look of all of them were, everybody was in dark clothing and everything was like super dark and things would happen at night. Like the whole
That's
thing.
interesting. I,
Yeah.
I don't know if I agree. I mean, we're going to talk about in the first one where you have criminals fighting Alex, falling into a a styrofoam pit,
Oh no.
and then we have people getting poisoned by wine
Yeah.
chemicals, and I mean, it was pretty.
I think I meant just
I
like
would say Ruby Herring and certainly Mystery 101 was
well,
way
yes.
darker.
Yes, that one was. Yes.
Mystery 101 has two people getting murdered and the guy holding Jill Wagner at gunpoint as they drive along. I mean, that was pretty dark.
Right. Well, in the last one of this one, you actually saw blood on his head, one of the people that died, and then at the end, he does hold them up at shotgun,
Yeah,
which I was like, dang, dude, you're like 5 feet away from them. You don't need a shotgun.
right.
Jeez.
I mean, I would say this definitely is darker than certainly the Emma Fielding. for sure.
Yeah.
Which was ridiculous. So I kind of enjoyed it because it was so silly.
Yeah, it was fun.
But with those pedantic professors made me laugh.
Oh yeah.
But it is certainly darker than the Ruby Herring, but I wouldn't say I think it's about on line with Haley Dean.
Well, see, and that's why I like those, because I think, when I compare them, I'm like, um, Aurora Tea Gardens are fun for me. I really like
Yeah.
Sally
Yeah.
and Aurora because that's light, and I feel like those, even though some of them are kind of super murdery, I feel like those are lighter. I think the character of Aurora Tea Garden is lighter, and then but
Yeah.
when it comes to what's the one you just said, the one with Kelly Martin,
Haley Dean.
yes, Haley Dean, she's an ex-lawyer and she's in a
Yeah.
relationship with a medical examiner, and I think overall, like, that's a darker tone to it. I don't know.
Yeah,
Anyways,
this is
but
more certainly darker than Murder She Baked, for
yes.
sure. And it's but yeah, I'd say it's like right in it's right in the it is in the higher things, but I don't know. I was just hoping it would really stand apart amongst
Yeah,
all these other
I
ones that
get
we're
you.
talking about, and
I
it
get you.
just didn't, and that's
Yeah.
frustrating. But anyway, so we kind of got that out of all the way because that's my main problem is that unmet potential, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It was just
Yeah.
disappointing.
I had fun with them. I'll say that.
So
Overall, I had fun with them. And if they came on again, like, what was it, Sunday they had a marathon, I would watch it again.
yeah.
So,
Okay,
anyway.
good.
Okay.
All right. So well, let's dive into each of these and talk about them real quick. So the first one is that I will say real quick that I did think the casting was very strong in this.
Agreed.
I thought that all of them were good and did a good job with what was asked of them. And Allison is good; she's strong. You have Benjamin Ayres playing Drew, the reporter for the paper,
Right.
and I really loved. We'll talk kind of later more about Rebecca Staub. Was great. Whenever she appeared, I
Yes.
really liked. I forgot to write down the actor who plays Chuck.
Oh, his name is Dave Collette.
Dave Collette. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Dave Collette as Chuck was brilliant, especially in the last one. The last one
Yes.
was definitely my favorite for sure.
Yes.
But he was great. I thought that pretty much the whole cast I thought was very strong. So that's a definite selling point for sure.
Agreed.
And so this first one, it has Alex returning to this small town that managed to have a thriving newspaper
Mm-hmm.
in Pennsylvania. And so she is getting ready to record her next episode of True Crime Podcast. And she's looking into the disappearance of this childhood friend of hers from 20 years past that had gone missing. And her uncle owns this newspaper there, the Chronicle, I think it was called. And so she starts working for the newspaper, and they kind of sponsor the podcast. And this was probably the best case of the three, even though it was kind of wonky at certain spots. But I liked the fact that it wasn't like an obvious murder. It was
Mm-hmm.
this person missing. So it added kind of a little bit of a layer. You don't always see that with Hallmark movies, with these
Mm-hmm.
mystery movies. Usually it's just like, oh, here's this nice woman. She's going to be gone in 5 minutes. We know that's true.
Right.
So we're like, ooh, she's not going to be long for the world. She's like
Right.
wearing pink. It's not looking good. And so anyway, that I thought was interesting. Would you agree?
I do. I did like, I don't, maybe I missed it at the beginning of this episode, because this to me was, I agree with you, is the best storyline, but I didn't think it was as strong as one of the others, just because you have to set up a lot. This is the first one in the series, so you have to set up a lot. So you have to know everybody, you have to introduce everybody, you have to let everybody know who is who. And I think I missed it at the beginning if they established that it was her uncle, because I think Drew is kind of confused about why Alex comes in and gets this preferential treatment from the paper, and he's like, okay, well, because he calls his boss the editor of the whole paper, and he immediately says, oh yeah, give her what she needs, let her go through all the records, let her have some space, we'll sponsor it and it'll be a good tie-in with the paper. And Drew's kind of like, oh,
I
okay.
think there's like a later conversation
Right,
where
because
it's like,
she walks in
oh,
on the
it's your
meeting.
niece.
Yeah, she walks in on the meeting, and he's like, can we please continue with our meeting? And she's like, oh, hi, Uncle Miles. And everybody like, record stops. And I'm like, oh, I thought that was a good twist. I thought it was clever. Like,
Yeah.
you didn't
Well,
really know until the middle that she knew him, and I thought that was kind of cool.
yeah. Well, and also I would be super PO'd if the editor of the paper uh that that just gave the editor-in-chief
Yes.
position to
Yes.
his niece who's just a podcaster. Like, what? I
I
was
mean,
so mad.
the whole time that scene was unfolding, when at the end, her uncle, who's a little older and hasn't been feeling that well, decides to step away for a little bit, and he says, Alex, you're here, I want you to move here, why don't you take over the paper? And she's like, what? And I'm thinking the whole time, okay, what does everybody else in the paper who's probably toiled away there for years think about this? And two, does she know anything about running the paper? Was that established that she's a previous newspaper person or a journalist or anything? So yeah, that was kind of confusing. But I kept thinking that it was going to play out more later in the series, that it was going to be a contentious point between Drew and her. Like, maybe he wanted to be editor-in-chief and she just came in and took it from him, but they never really came back to it. It was all just kind of a joke.
Yeah, it was bizarre. I mean, and it seems kind of to fly in the face of what these shows do. These shows are not about professional investigators.
Right.
Shows are about amateur sleuths. And I forgot to mention this earlier, but I found in this interview with Sarah Koenig from Serial that she said that they had this whole backstage thing where she talks about things, and she said that they were caught off guard when amateur sleuths began their own investigations as season 1 was unfolding. So this is how they totally could have done this show. They could have had the podcaster been a different character. And you have the fan of the podcast who's the amateur sleuth who's following the details, and each week he gets, and her and the podcaster end up getting into coots. Not some
Rachel, that'd be a good cozy mystery. Write it.
Right? That would totally be amazing. It would be so good. Anyway, so I just think, yeah, they already have amateur sleuths. I was like, wow. But anyway, oh well. So there's this woman, Gina, who is missing, and then you have her kind of meeting all your characters, like you say. You have Chuck and Eileen, you have her uncle Miles, and I always like to divide these mysteries. So we're gonna have some spoilers alert. Divide them into 4 categories. So we have the murderer, the victim, the family fun is what I call it. It's just like all the accessory characters, depending on the show, it's different. And then red herrings. So the murderer, well, let's start with the victim. So the victim in here, we have Gina is missing. And we have Courtney ends up dying in a fire. There's a fire.
Right. And they had worked together. Gina and Courtney had worked together as when they were younger, the night that Gina disappeared. So that's their relationship from the get-go.
Yeah. And just before that, before she dies, they'd interviewed her. Right. And so everything's looking pretty suspicious. And so the red herrings, the family fun, we've already talked about. You have Drew, Miles, Chuck, Eileen, and you have fireman Sean. Those are kind of the accessory characters in this case. So your red herrings are, it could be she could have gotten to an accident. There's the whole where they're investigating the waterfall. Could she have fallen into the waterfall? What happened? There's this guy, her ex named Troy, who could have taken her out. And then there's this guy who is working with Courtney, setting up these kind of shell companies. He has this sort of scam going on. Right. So what did you think about all these red herrings?
Honestly, some of them kind of got confusing for me. I try and work my way through the puzzle, and I try and think of who's the person we've seen a couple times and we're not really meant to pay a lot of attention to. But there was a lot of these in here, which made for a good whodunit. But at the same time, at the end, basically in all three of these, at the end, I was very confused about who was bad and who was good. I couldn't keep track of everybody.
Yeah, there was kind of a lot going on. And yeah, I agree. I didn't live tweet this one, and that helps me kind of remember things better. But yeah, there's basically there was kind of a organized crime syndicate in town, in this small town. And so Gina had hidden out from this, had seen what this guy was doing, running this crime syndicate. And then he basically had like a thug detective that was kind of his enforcer, right? His goon, kind of. And then so she runs off and hides for 20 years, and because she's so afraid of these mafia guys, right, and what they're going to do. And so basically Alex kind of is able to uncover, then find Gina, and then brings her back. And then there's a final ending fight that really was pretty ridiculous. I think it was, it is in like a trampoline world or something like that.
They ended up going to Sky Zone, which there are 2 Sky Zones where I live, like not in the same city. And when I saw that, I died because my kids go there. And I'm like, okay, this is a legit Sky Zone. I recognized all the artwork, and I was just like, this is a legit Sky Zone. I'm like, big promotion for Sky Zone, I guess. But yeah, with it was so over the top.
It was really crazy. But oh well, what are you gonna do? And so yeah, this, how many crowns did you give this one, this first one?
I don't know. I think the first ones are always the hardest, just because like I said, you have to establish so much. But I liked everybody in it, and I had fun with it. So I'm gonna go with 3.25.
Okay. I'm gonna give it.
You can do it. You can be me.
I'm gonna give it 2.5 crowns. I have it at number 11 in my ranking.
Gotcha.
I have it just below Winter Princess and just above Valentine in the Vineyard.
Okay, I will say in its defense, if you really did fight somebody in a Sky Zone and kick them into that foam pit, they are stuck there. It is near impossible to get out of those dang foam blocks. There's like no way to get any footage. You have to, it's such an odd thing. I'm like, he would have been stuck in there. They had plenty of time to call the cops because you can't get out of those things. So kudos for that.
That's really funny. That's true. That is true. Taking some upper body strength, I think, to get out of there.
Like I said, I take my kids there all the time, and once you get in, it's like quicksand. You're done for.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
all right. So yeah, so then we had 16 total movies so far that I've watched on Hallmark, and so, all right. Well, let's talk about the second one. The second one, and I must say, this, maybe I shouldn't brag about this, but this was my shining hour of live tweeting.
Ooh.
I live tweeted this movie because nobody else could do it, which was fine. Nobody else could do it while watching the Oscars and live tweeting the Oscars. I did both at the same time. And
that's because you're a professional.
It was amazing. I was very impressed with myself, and I could only do it if one of the things I was watching is like nonfiction. I can't follow 2 plots, but right. I can just be like, oh, look, that one. There you go.
Right.
And yes, it was very good. So, So this was the wrong man. And basically there's this lawyer who has died, this young lawyer, and there who was the wife of this man played by Peter Benson. And the Peter Benson character was acquitted, but he doesn't feel like he's been acquitted by the members of the town, and so he wants her to do the podcast on the case as a way to vindicate him. And this is the one that uses the podcast the least. I mean, she is. I started counting. I'm like, been 30 minutes. She hasn't been on it one time. And then she finally gets on it. Like, it was just so minimal. But anyway, so this one, we have there's a lot of mafia. Organized crime is a problem in this town in Pennsylvania. What is going on? But this one, the victim is this wife of the Peter Benson character. I think maybe her name was Susan, if can't remember. But anyway. Yeah. And so then we had some red herrings in this. We have the Philadelphia Mafia has moved in next door. Get that going on. Very exciting. We have the husband, obviously, is a suspect. We have the brother, who at first I was like, this guy, I don't know. He's pretty shady to me, the brother.
Yeah.
And that's what's his name?
I got it up right here. His name is Jesse Moss, and I will say that he can pull off creepy or super cute. So in this movie, he really pulled off creepy, because at the beginning I was like, I have questions, sir.
He looks kind of like the guy who is on October Kiss to me.
October Kiss. I know the movie. Oh, the lead in October Kiss?
Yeah.
I can see that.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
And so then there's the dog washing lady who has
she's a Hallmark staple. She's super cute. Yes.
Yeah. And so they think, because she's like an ex-con and has this sort of shady back when they figure it out.
They show her mugshot.
Yeah, that's right.
You're kind of an expert at Photoshop. That's amazing. Yeah.
And then there's all these people down at the dock.
Right.
A lot of time spent at the dock in this one, and I think his name was Phil. Is the guy that is kind of looking through stuff. He's never really like a suspect, but there's just a lot of time spent down there.
Yeah, he does a lot of like 2-second too long looks at people.
Yeah.
And you know that he's actually probably really nice, but they just kept posturing him as just like a little too starey.
And then there's a break-in at their house, and the guy that ends up getting arrested for that, I put on Twitter, I said, because he refers to the girl who was murdered as a solid B. I was like, let's just arrest him anyway. He belongs in jail. He's not the murderer. So what's going on? Why would you refer to a woman as a solid B?
Oh my gosh, I missed that. That's terrible.
Yeah. And so it's like, let's just put him in jail. But then I do like at the very, very beginning, this guy finds this bones with this diamond ring on it. And like, if I found a bones with a diamond ring on it, I would freak out.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if you're just like running along your day at the park and it's like,
that's my, like, I hike a lot, and one of my biggest fears is not a body, is like just any sort of animal carcass. And so that alone would freak me out. And he just kind of like, he pulls out his phone. He's like, yeah, I'm at such and such place, and I think I found a dead body. And I'm like, seriously?
Yeah. Like, what? And so, yeah, they did have a little cute scene where they are investigating the shipping crate, and it gets picked up and moved around and stuff, and they get pretty cozy in that scene.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. He gets right up on her, and I was just like,
which I liked. That was good.
You know what it made me think of? It made me think of that part in Greece when they were in that maze at the end in that little Shake Shack, and they were dancing, and it kept like tilting them back and forth, and it made me,
Yeah.
because they just kept
Yeah.
running back from one side to the other, and I know it's supposed to be they were actually getting moved around, but it was very.
And that's like my favorite thing in any kind of romance to ever exist is when people just like happen to fall conveniently
Oh
onto
yeah,
each other. It's my favorite thing. I think it's so hilarious. I cannot imagine that ever happening ever in the real world. That it's just like, oh, look, I've fallen in a spot where I'm just staring into your eyes.
yeah. I've just fallen right on you
If
with my hands gently laid on your
yeah,
chest.
if I ever meet Mr.
Oh,
Sunshine, we're gonna have reenactments where we're gonna make that happen because it
oh,
will be the
yeah.
greatest thing ever.
Plus, I think I'm
Be like,
not sure that I don't know in real life, but Benjamin Ayers, how do you say it?
I'm
Ayers?
not sure how you say it.
Okay,
Ayers,
he looks tall,
Ayers,
and yeah, he looks tall, and
yeah.
this is where I'll get really superficial. So I'm sorry, y'all. I know I should be focused on content, but he looks really good in the shirt. Like he wears the
Yeah,
shirt really
he
well,
does.
and he wears that leather jacket really well. And so
He
I was like, yeah, fall right into him.
yeah. It was really good. I
Yeah,
agree with you.
yeah.
And so what are those? So there's this creepy mafia guy out at the farm, the sunflower
Yes.
farm. And what they're making
Fake
extra
olive
virgin
oil.
olive oil?
Yes, fake olive oil.
This is
Take the
very
sunflower
weird.
oil, and then you add something, and then you put water or cut it with water or something, and then you slap a label on it, and then you make a bunch of money by saying it's exclusive.
That is
Which
the weirdest like mafia thing I've ever heard.
it sounded to me. I was like,
Like
this is, I mean, the way they showed all those chemicals, I was like, they're not going to go into the drug territory because this is
yeah.
Hallmark, and I can't imagine this being some sort of meth lab. And so then they pull out sunflower oil, and I'm like, I knew it, Hallmark. I knew you wouldn't bring drugs into this.
Because isn't sunflower oil like really expensive?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's so true. It's like, oh, they don't want to have it be some meth lab, like you say, so they've got to
So
figure
they made
out
it
some
something
other.
cooking, which
So
was
it's not like
amazing. I loved it. Yeah.
it was awesome. It was really funny. Your secret olive oil thing. So anyway, they make no attempt to like hide it. If I knew that I had been interviewed like several times,
Right.
like I would like put it in the basement at the very least. Like
Yeah.
it's so
I
funny.
mean, this guy was in prison and he got out and he's risking it all for
For
olive
all
oil.
oh my
He's
gosh.
like, this is it. This is how I'm making my money. And yeah, well,
Yeah. And then
that's
there's that the whole thing with the cell phone case was quite the thing. So first of all, you have this whole confrontation between the brother character and the Peter Benson character, and they have this like cell phone showdown. Like
yeah.
I'm gonna throw it in the lake. Oh, don't throw it in the lake. I know what it's very tense. It was
He's
very
like, I
good.
got you. I got you. And you're just like, oh my gosh.
And then the Phil guy, he finds the phone case, and at the whole time there's also this lady named Betsy. Well, at first she claims she knew nothing about it. She wasn't involved at all. But then it
Yeah.
turns out, shockingly, that her and Peter Benson were having an
I
affair.
know. They made it
Whoa.
happen. Because at the beginning they were like, y'all had an affair. And they both were like, no, we wouldn't do that. We were just friends. And I'm like, of course they wouldn't, because this is Hallmark. And then bam, they were like, we won't give you meth lab, but we'll give you an affair.
I know. I was shocked. Especially if he knew that kind of baggage was out there. Why on earth would he want this podcast to be done?
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so you have Betsy, and Betsy had amazing hair. I was very envious of her hair. It was very
I
pretty.
wanted to be like, I need your curl, because naturally my hair is curly. I
Me
always
too.
flat iron it. And I'm like, I need your curl care routine.
I
Because I
agree.
like
It
it.
looked
Okay.
really good.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, I agree. And so that's kind of, I guess, a red herring to a certain point. And
Yes.
then, and so does Peter Benson's character know that Betsy is the murderer?
I don't think so. I honestly don't. I think he was just as bewildered as everyone else. I think I don't know. I think he may have. I don't even know if he had suspicions. I think he just was so consumed with the fact that he didn't do it. I don't think he really branched out enough to think about who might
Yeah.
also have reason to do it. But it was fun to see Peter Benson in this type of role.
Mm-hmm. So
Yeah.
yes, he's always amazing. He's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the phone case is found by Phil.
Right.
And I mean, how they would ever know that this was related to it was quite. And then like Betsy still has the same purse.
I know.
Like move on from that purse. Like what is this? Like
I know.
I was thinking to myself, like, what is this, a Dolce & Gabbana or Gucci?
I know. Just yeah.
Your Michael Kors purse that you can't get rid of? Like, what? It was really wow. And it matched the cell phone case. And so then Alex sees that and she's like, oh my gosh, this is it. And then Betsy pulls out the gun and we get
Yeah, she sees also that little charm, that little St. Anthony's charm clipped on her purse. And I was like, why would she have that out?
And my favorite, I think, in this whole thing was how that they crashed through that glass bulletin board thing.
Yeah.
Like, that was pretty fun. I enjoyed that.
Okay, I will say that my favorite thing was when Fireman Sean came over to the brother's house and he walks in and he sees their entire like house covered in all these like weird, like basically like what Alex and Drew do. They post up all those pictures and they have arrows drawn, all these notes everywhere, and his whole house is covered like that. He's like, oh, so this is a lot. And the brother's like, yeah, my wife is gone and so is the kid, and I'm just, yeah, this is my life now. I was just like, I don't know why, but it made me laugh.
Well, in the next one, they are obviously trying to make Toby Levin's character Sean the fireman, and like this little like love triangle between Alex and Sean and Drew. And I say dial it up because
there was barely any.
He was barely in it. So yeah, dial that up. I'd enjoy that. I think that could be fun.
I was kind of, I mean, again, I watched these for the mystery, not for the romance side of it, but I do enjoy the very subtle hints here and there. And then at the end, you know, there's always some sort of like long last look or like maybe, a frightened little, and then they, you know, have that moment, you know. But there was none of that. And which I honestly, okay, this is going to be terrible. I was like, please don't kiss Fireman Sean because he's your brother-in-law in the other movies, and I don't think I can handle that mentally. I need a few more episodes before I can get over that. And I was just like, okay. But nothing really, there wasn't a whole lot of romance in any of them. Like not even like bigger hints. I'm with you. Turn it up. I need more.
Yeah. If you're still gonna go the classic Hallmark route, dial it up for sure. Or at least don't have it at all. Like don't just have this like tiny bit. That's not satisfying.
Yeah, because at first I thought Fireman Sean was just gonna be a friend, and then you're right. They kind of turned it, and they were like, well, maybe he's a thing.
Yeah. And it's Toby Levins. He's very attractive. So
I didn't mind that, but I was just like, no, not with Alex though, because y'all are related.
So yeah, I honestly had more fun talking about this with you than I did watching it. I don't know. But this one was just, I don't know, it wasn't my favorite. So how many crowns would you give this one?
This was my least favorite of the three. So I'm going to go ahead and say, I'm just going to give it a solid 3. I still had fun with it, but it was my least favorite of the 3.
Yeah. So I'm going to give this a 2. I have it at number 15.
Gotcha.
Just under Snow Coming and above Ruby Herring. Ruby Herring is going to be tough to lose that bottom spot for me. It still has the hotness prize with Stephen Huszar, but that. But anyway, okay, so let's move on. So the last one is the Chronicle Mysteries Vines That Bind. The thing I liked about this one is that they did use the podcast scene a little bit more. There were like 4 times or so, and she actually like brought it with her. And it was a little better. It still doesn't really make sense, but at least it was integrated a little more. So I appreciated that. And also I liked the fact that I thought it worked pretty well. The fact that everything was just contained to this one family, this one. You even have Linda Dano as like matriarch, which was brilliant.
Yes.
And so I liked that it was more small.
You know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of those later episodes of Murder, She Wrote, where she left Cabot Cove and would do these, episodes in various other towns or other countries, and it reminded me of that. So I thought it was kind of cool that they
Yeah.
left that they left that little town and went to another little town.
Yeah. And so basically you have this guy who is killed in the vat room for the making wine. And he is killed by the CO2 gas that's emitted from these big vats of wine. And at first it's ruled as an accident, but then they find out about it. They decide to look into it. She decides to use it for the podcast. And the victim, is this patriarch guy who's killed. And then later on, as she's investigating, the son, one of the sons of the family, is killed. And this is outside, it's just by the road. He's kind of found killed. And so there were a ton of red herrings in this one. We had Caitlin, who I thought for sure was the murderer. They successfully tricked me. I really thought it was
Me
her.
too.
They did a good
Me
job.
too. Yes.
And I don't know. I was just, because they love having, just like with Betsy, there's all these thugs and mafia, whatever. And it's this, this woman. They love that kind of thing on these Hallmark movies. And so I thought, oh, this disgruntled niece is going to be the one. But anyway, so there was Caitlin, and then you have you have Linda Dano's character, who's just kind of the matriarch. She's not really a suspect, but anyway, she's there.
They tried to make her one, like in the middle-ish, with having her name on some documents, like her initials.
Yeah, on the will.
But it was it was very short-lived. Yeah.
The other main suspect is this guy Ryan, who was very. What did you think of his sweater? I thought of you. I saw the sweater. I was like, ooh, this guy's very suspect with this tan sweater.
He was too creepy for me to even notice this. He was very intense. Like as soon as he laid eyes on Alex, I was like, "Oh, all right, settle down, sir."
And Chuck, this is his shining hour. This is the greatest thing to ever exist. And Chuck, first of all, he brings the chalkboard downstairs, and that whole scene was so great. I loved it.
Oh my gosh. I just love that he knew everyone, or he knew somebody's cousin who knew somebody. I just loved everything about Chuck.
It reminded me, his role actually reminded me a lot of Marshall Erickson on How I Met Your Mother. Like just the way there's a certain innocence about, and there's even a whole episode where Marshall steals the blackboard from Lily's school, and so that they can do this whole tournament of Barney's girlfriends. And anyway, I don't know, there's just something about him with like the snacks and other stuff that kind of reminded me of that.
Oh, him character. In that car with all those cake rolls, I died laughing.
It's so funny.
Like, Chuck is me and I am Chuck, because that's exactly the way I would set up to spy on somebody. I'd be like, give me all the little Debbies.
Yeah, he's got all these Swiss rolls and that's like somebody needs to check him for diabetes after
my gosh,
like, it was really funny. And then I also loved Rebecca Staub in this. Eileen, she was amazing. I've always loved her. She elevates anything. I can't think of any time I've seen her in anything where I was like, wow, she wasn't great. She's always great. And she was really good in this. I thought she was just, I don't know. I just really liked every single scene she was in. She was so so sneaky about how she was getting the information. She's like looking in the yearbook and looking in the looking at the papers by the other by the other lady. I think her name was Tracy, the lady that worked the mom character kind of.
Oh yeah.
Right? That the one that was really stressed out all the time.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't think that she's the murderer. I was pretty sure on that. I thought it was definitely
Oh
either
wait,
Kate.
was it Mary? Her name was
I was
Mary.
Mary. Okay, maybe
Yeah,
Mary.
yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't remember if it was Tracy or Mary. But
That's right.
anyway, it was something like that. And and I there's a point where she's like, "Oh, I'll bring out a special bottle of rosé," and I'm like, I feel a little nervous but I was pretty sure that she wasn't the murderer.
Right. I thought they set it up for
Pretty sure.
her too early in the
Right.
show for it to be her. And she played nervous really well. Like
Yeah, she did.
nervous uncertainty, she played that really well. And so
Yeah.
I was really digging her character.
I did absolutely die laughing when they're having this supposed uh like jam session where they're giving out different assignments at this newspaper.
Yeah.
And like newspapers just don't work that way now. Like it's so different. Like and but they have they're planning on giving a 4-column quarter with photos on Tina the llama.
Yes.
I'm like,
Tina the llama.
yeah. Is it somehow related to Mittens over at Vinny?
That's what I was thinking too. I was
Yeah.
like, okay, where has this llama been? Because I feel like Tina the llama is a thing, and I should probably remember. And then I was like, I know Mittens.
Yeah.
Shout
4
out to that
columns.
guy. Yeah.
4 columns with photos. I mean that it was so funny. I was dying laughing. And so yes. And so you also have Drew's niece who's working at the paper. And this
Oh,
is
it's his niece? I thought it was his daughter.
I thought it was 2 until I was corrected.
Oh, seriously? Because I thought she said, "Hey, Dad," and at one point Alex is like, "Dad," and he's like, "Yeah," and then she says, where does she stay? You know, where's her mom?"
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was
I,
his daughter.
well, if he
Is it two different people?
no, the girl who like does the research for them
Right.
on the
I thought
form
it was his daughter.
it was like form 4899
Yes.
TJ or whatever. I'm like, wow.
Did they fill out their TPS report?
Yeah, that's right. So there's also this young man who's kind of a little bit shady along with Caitlin and like I said Ryan and there's this whole part of the soil of this neighboring farm that's been kind of contaminated, and so there's that going on, and then there's this crazy woman with a gun, and you knew she wasn't the murderer because that's just too obvious, but she was nuts. Yeah. I'd be like, stay away from her.
Didn't get any character from her other than she came out with a shotgun and said, "I don't talk to the press."
Yeah, right.
Like, dang. Okay.
Yes. And so the reason why there's also this lawyer guy, and I just kept thinking of him as Mr. Peck from Chesapeake Shores.
Yes.
And I don't think this actor has ever been anything but a evil man of business. He's all the poor guy needs to play Santa Claus once just because he's always. And I should have known from the very beginning that he was a bad man of business and he was a lawyer, even worse.
I go by his glasses frames, honestly, because I'm like, oh, these red circle ones, that's not, nope. I feel like he's up to no good. Because he always wears the same style of frames. He was just in the other one, the Just Add Romance, and he played her dad, but he was very stifled and like businessy.
Yeah, and that was such an odd. I liked the movie a lot, but I thought it was such a weird performance. It was such a weirdly written character. Not really his fault. I thought it was a very weirdly written character. I don't know. It was strange, but anyway, yeah, he was pretty suspect from the beginning, the lawyer, and so he's one of the members of the family. He's the nephew of the Linda Dano character, and she's kind of related to everybody. And I wish they'd given maybe even one more scene for Linda Dano because I really thought she was fun.
Yes.
And so I hope that we get it. I would love to see her in a Christmas movie. I think she'd be amazing.
I thought it was
Yeah.
funny that she kept thinking that Alex was his assistant, and she was like, "Don't touch those cookies. We can have something for you in the kitchen." I was like, "Oh my gosh!"
Right. And I loved when they bring the chalkboard down, and they're they got Ryan there with that picture of him as mugshot. I'm like, obviously he's not the murderer.
Right.
Of course. And I think that's why I thought for sure it was Caitlin, because she was the other person
Yes.
on that board on the other side. And Alex even said, like, why do we think it's Caitlin? Like, what? Because
Yeah.
anyway, and so the so there's all that. So they start looking into Caitlin, and Chuck does the stakeout, and he figures out that through his stakeout that Caitlin and the boyfriend are going to be leaving town to go and get married, basically to go and elope because they're in love,
Right.
and the family is really against it. And so that's why they're being kind of shady, because there's this whole thing with Caitlin and the hard drive as well.
Mm-hmm.
And she's trying to erase everything off the hard drive. And Alex is like, well, you can still find those things that have been erased. She's like, oh, you can't.
Which they make it seem like it's just no big deal. Like everything has an actual copy, and I'm like, okay, go ahead and go
I,
with that. And they
I,
just send it off to this guy, and
yeah, I don't know about that, but yeah. Anyway, she's like, and Alex says, uh, well, can I have the hard drive? It's like, oh, we can't leave it unattended. She's like, what about this hard drive? But it is
yeah,
like, oh,
this
okay,
this wraps brand new.
right. So anyway, that whole scene, like you said, with Chuck and the stakeout was the best, hilarious. And then you get the one guy that's out on bail, but the lawyer's being still pretty shifty.
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty because they tell Chuck, gotta stop him, you gotta stop him. And he's like, how am I gonna stop him? Like, what? And so
It's like,
he gets him to
oh,
dump his car, which was pretty clever. It was pretty good.
yeah.
And then there is also this whole scene where Alex goes into the vat room. I don't know what you call it. The distillery, I guess is what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, whatever. And she goes in there, and she gets locked in, and she sends a text to Drew. She sends she sends the text, that room, help, 2 exclamation points. And he's just kind of like, what's going on here? He's
Right. Because earlier she sent him a help text, and all she needed him to do was open the like dial on the
yeah.
valve. Like, can you help me? He's like, this requires a help text, and she's like, yeah, it does.
But if somebody had already been murdered via that room, if somebody sent me text, that room, I think I would let them cry wolf a couple more times before I was like, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so she does end up getting rescued. And so
Yes,
she,
by his very, very attractive door kick down. I was like,
right.
I will rewatch this again. Oh, wait, I just did. Oh, I just did again.
Yes.
Thank you, Drew.
Right. I was
Thank you.
like, well, he was a little late in his chivalry, but yes, it was
But,
good.
yeah.
And so then they go and they meet with Linda Dano one more time, and they figure out that the lawyer is her lawyer nephew has all this motivation or whatever. And then they catch him through kind of staging this thing where he's there with this gun, and he thinks that I guess he's going to kill him. And they're like, oh, surprise, you just recorded that all on tape, and the police are all here. And that is one thing about this series, is because most of the other series, they involve the police in some way in these investigations. And I guess because these are supposedly cold cases, they don't need to as much, I guess. But yeah, you would think that the mean, there's almost no involvement of
Right.
any law enforcement at all in either of these three cases.
Right.
It's pretty interesting. Anyway, so they catch the lawyer guy, and there you go. That's the end of this one. But this one was by far the best because I think, first of all, I'd kind of resigned myself that it wasn't going to be what I wanted it to be, and okay, whatever, I'm just going to try to enjoy it.
Mhm.
Second of all, the podcast was at least used a little bit more than the others.
Right.
And third, Chuck and Eileen were the best to ever exist.
Yes.
They were amazing.
Right.
Yeah. And they really did get me on Caitlin. I really thought for sure it was her.
I did too. I really did. I thought it was going to come out that she had, I thought honestly it was going to come out that she had backing from the lawyer guy and he was helping her to cover up her crimes, and that it was going to be her all along. So yes, this by far was the most fun for me because I was just very, very, oh my gosh, guessing the whole time, changing my mind the whole time. Oh no, it's this. Oh no, it's this. And so yeah, this one to me was the most fun.
Mm-hmm. So how many crowns do you give this one?
I gave this one 3.5, mainly for Chuck and his Little Debbies.
Yep. So I will give it 3.25 crowns. So pretty good. I have it currently at 10th place.
Oh, okay.
I have it just after Winter Castle and just before Winter Princess. So that's where it ends up. The rating.
I see that all of these were written by Melissa Salmons, who basically did not every, but most of Alison Sweeney's Hallmark stuff. She did all three of these. She did Christmas at Hollywood Lodge, The Murder She Baked, one of those. She did The Irresistible Blueberry Farm, and then she's done a ton of writing for Days of Our Lives. So I think that's pretty cool, because that Alison Sweeney is the executive producer on this. She's been a producer on, a lot of her other stuff. But I really like that she brought in, a woman writer. I think Craig Winman helped with this last one.
Yeah, I saw him on Twitter.
Yeah, and I really like his writing, and I think he's got some new stuff coming out. So, like in the mystery world, so I'm pretty excited about that because I do enjoy his writing, and I think he's funny.
So we don't know the ratings yet for this last one.
Okay,
that's not in, but the highest so far this year on Hallmark Movies and Mysteries is Mystery 101 at 1.50 million viewers. Yeah. And then you have the second Chronicle Mysteries at 1.40. And then there's the first one at 1.26. And so at least it must have had some good word of mouth, or I don't know, interesting. And then Ruby Herring, Emma Fielding 1.23, Ruby Herring 1.22. So the ratings, I would be surprised if we get any more Ruby Herring, to be honest. And I'd be surprised if we get any more Emma Fielding, but we'll see how it goes. It just, there's just so many in the works, so many new ones.
I know, which is exciting. But I'm just wondering, I see a lot of potential here outside of the podcast stuff. I see a lot of potential here, and it'd be interesting to see how these characters, move on and evolve, and what else they can do with the paper and whatnot. So
anyway, hopefully we have it. I was really nervous about this podcast because I didn't want it to come off as too negative, because I was pretty disappointed by the series and it wasn't what I was hoping it would be. But hopefully we had some good points, some bad points. We tried, and I really appreciate you coming on and talking, especially last minute.
Of course.
It was very nice of you. And so how can people find you online?
You can find me at Twitter and Instagram at Girl Gone Hallmark.
Great. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews on iTunes and YouTube. You want to check out my channel this week. I'm going to be talking about Captain Marvel. So exciting, coming up. And I'm going to be doing later on in the week, I'm going to be doing my podcast with my friend Trevor from How to Love Comics, all about both the comics and the movie. It's going to be really cool. So check over my channel. I'd really appreciate it. And make sure you're following the podcast at Hallmarkies Pod all of our social media and on iTunes and YouTube. If you're listening on iTunes, please give us your ratings and reviews. We really appreciate it. And if you're listening on YouTube, please give us a thumbs up and a subscription. We really appreciate that as well. So thanks so much, Lisa. You're the best. And
Aw.
let us know what you think about the Chronicle Mysteries. What were you disappointed? Were you excited? What did you think? Let us know in the comments or on Twitter. We'd really appreciate it. And thanks again, and we'll talk to y'all later.
Bye.
Bye.